Good evening and welcome to Special Assignment. I'm Ashraf Garda. Copper cable theft is costing the South African economy billions of rands in financial losses each year. With weak regulations and loopholes in the scrap metal dealers industry, the larger cable theft syndicates seem to get away scot-free. Now there's a push for cable theft to be branded economic sabotage. But will this put an end to this global problem? Adele van Niekerk investigates.
As jy miskien begin as jy miskien gee my 100 rand en so 6-7 strooi wat jy vat mense wat buttons ook sê gee my 2-3 buttons en 200 rand.
On the Cape Flats, addicts sell stolen copper desperate for a fix, often paying the highest price.
Ten 1 uur en 2 ure. Alles in tren so 20 meter, 25 tot maximum 30 meter. Alles uit.
John Sloot, worth a few thousand on the black market. To get them, he causes damage worth millions.
Voor die kabel was sneeuw so, voel het eerst op die kabel die anders zo wat nie. En dan gaan we nou te die grond, die trains maak. Nou begin een hier te sny.
John's basic tools of his trade, used to cut through 132,000 volt cables in his frantic pursuit of red gold. We're in Manenberg on the Cape Flats. Here the lines between drug syndicates and copper thieves often become blurry. It's here where the City of Cape Town's anti-theft unit shifts its focus against this growing crime. Daryl Domeyer is a man on a mission.
Ek het gekry 31 boedering.
He's one of the lead intelligence operators of Cape Town's anti-theft copper unit, or copperheads as they're known. This suspect was badly injured in a daring stunt to cut through these high voltage cables in Surrey Estate. Here you can see the trenches that they dug all along the power lines. Despite causing millions of rands worth of damage, it's still not seen as a serious crime. Inside sleeps the security guard that must watch over the crime scene. Daryl goes to one of the suspects' homes to follow some leads. At the back of the house he finds evidence of plastic casings of stripped copper cables.
As you can see, this is the remains of the cables that were stripped.
Daryl receives a tip-off of another spot where cables were stripped. Here, children play next to the evidence of a crime that was committed. Daryl decides to return to the area under the cover of night. It's 9 p.m. on a Friday evening. A call comes through of tampered power cables along the highway. But the team arrives minutes too late. The cable thieves have already made off with their loot.
This cable has been freshly cut. But if you look at the sand, quite a bit of rain fell over the last couple of minutes. But look at the condition of the sand. That is an indication that the suspect can't be too far from this location.
The team decides to pursue the suspects. And soon 2 suspects are caught as they're trying to burn off plastic casings of copper cables. They lead the team to the house of a 3rd suspect.
You find it? I found it full sun. Wait, staan voor mij uit, Lina. Daar. Anna nila. Kijk hoe vol zand er zijn.
Yo, Nasi bakar ne? Raju Amar ne? Onder is aan. Yo, die was bezig van.
Bakker die dan gaan shopping. Waar wat deed? Waar je geweest? Kijk hoe leuk zij vol zand. Waar je geweest? Waar?
The suspect confessed to have sold the copper to a local scrap dealer, and Daryl decides to investigate the following morning. But our camera crew is denied access. We decide to go in with a spy camera to verify claims that the scrap dealer has not been buying copper cables in the last few weeks. Here you can see large bags filled with copper cables. This worker is sorting through the scrap copper wires. Daryl returns without making much progress. He knows it's almost impossible to link last night's evidence with stripped copper found inside. But he receives more information about the company's dealings.
Okay, thanks man. Turkey is the definition that they use. The people that have hunger, the withdrawal symptoms that the drug user experience is referred to as Turkey.
Ala vra was hier baako so reg en baako die klomp koper en awalo sê nee o is net 'n koper myn gewoon uitgesnuffel.
You have to ask yourself, is it reasonable that a person that's unemployed, that brings in on a continuous basis shiny bright copper cable weekly or every second week, that he's no electrician, he's not working for a company that does electrical installations, for example, but he's bringing in shiny bright copper cable the whole time? I mean, you have to start asking these questions.
At the bottom of the supply chain is the bread and butter copper thief. He will sell his copper to bigger syndicates who combine their loot with other groups. This can then be sold to backyard scrap metal dealers that operate 24/7, or to bigger scrap metal shops that buy in large quantities. But at the top of the chain sits the big scrap metal companies who can process the copper before it's shipped off to global markets. Here, cable thieves are caught on camera at a Gauteng power station. It's now where the stakes get much higher.
You have your bread and butter thief, you have your more organized group, and of course then you have your syndicates involved. This is where the big money starts rolling, where you have your 70 million rand worth of exports, your 430 million rand worth of exports.
Another cable thief caught in the act. There's now a big push to get cable thieves like this one charged with economic sabotage. This can mean a prison sentence of up to 15 years for these men.
Coming up, we track the route of stolen copper through the black market.
Cable thief syndicates often strike at night. While one member of the group keeps watch, the others will dig trenches and cut the cables. They can sell the copper for 40 Rand a kilogram. This young mother was only 16 when she joined a cable theft syndicate 2 years ago.
Toe ek gesien van die gea wat hulle kry, hulle gaan kos of hulle klere of wat en ek weet toe nog gewerkie, my man het ook gewerkie. En Matthijana gaan ook sommer saam gaan die koper gaan uitdaag.
The leader of the syndicate says the scrap metal dealers knew they were buying stolen copper.
Alle weet natuurlijk dat het is gesteel. Van enige een zal weten dat het is gesteel van waar kom een gewone persoon wat die werk die moet zo stripzakken, zulke goedzakken vol koper signing bereid.
But in order for them to make money, it will have to go to a market. The market at this stage would be our scrap dealers because this is the only place where they can really go sell it.
The copperheads inspect backyard dealers, or bucket shops as they're known, on a daily basis. Although at the bottom of the supply chain, there are hundreds in operation and remain largely unregulated.
Since our last visit, the police also inspected the property and removed the scale from the property. We issued them with a 1,000 Rand fine as well. So, according to the gentleman, they subsequently seized their business. However, I'm doubtful about that because of information that we received from perpetrators that we were arrested 2 weeks ago, that the business is still being conducted.
Cable thieves strike in the suburb of Rylands. The loot could easily have been sold to a bucket shop, but residents here blame the large scrap metal companies at the top of the supply chain.
There's a buyer, and the biggest buyers is the people who's melting it down. And I'll be open to you, on taps, I saw SM Metal buying it in. So that is, it tells me enough. It tells me enough at the end of the day.
This is a common scene outside large scrap metal companies, where the desperately poor scrape the bottom of the barrel to make ends meet.
SM Metal.
The name SA Metal keeps coming up. It's one of the main outlets for recycled metals on the Cape Flats. The company denied us access to its premises. But on its website it proclaims to be one of the largest scrap recyclers in South Africa. In this online promotional video, the company showcases its facilities to smelt down large quantities of copper and to package it mainly for the export market. In 2004, SA Metal and an employer faced charges relating to stolen copper. They were convicted with possession of stolen goods, but appealed successfully against this conviction last year. One of the biggest challenges is linking big scrap metal dealers with stolen copper. We gain easy access to this company's premises. Here you can see people queuing for their copper to be weighed. At no point is anybody asked for identification. In this footage, a transaction with stolen copper is captured on camera. And in less than 30 minutes, profit is made from stolen goods. As one of the largest market players, we ask SA Metal for comment that it's bought stolen copper knowingly or not in the past, but the company remains silent.
Once the cable is stolen, it's very difficult to determine whether or not it's been acquired legally. And so the companies use that loophole.
And it's not to say that those purchasers of stolen copper willingly do so. They're often unaware that the copper they're purchasing has been stolen.
And what the scrapyard dealers at this stage are doing is to not ask questions like that. They seem, or the perception is that they will buy in and then claim that no, we weren't aware.
We gain easy access to this holding area next to Cape Town's port, where stolen copper are often hidden in containers like these. Tons of copper leaves Cape Town's harbour for the export market, despite any significant copper mining sector in South Africa. Most of our copper is scrap metal. No one knows how much of it is stolen.
We do have a weakness at South African ports, and that weakness relates to our ability to look inside containers, to have the necessary equipment, the X-ray equipment required to look inside those containers. Currently, we may have only 2 and probably 1 of those X-ray machines that are required.
Although some of the stolen copper in South Africa is transported by road to neighboring countries, most are shipped off to global destinations. And our stolen copper lands up in Italy, Dubai, Russia and India. But the biggest copper buyer remains China. China's economic growth has seen an explosion of its building and power sectors. This means an ever-increasing need for copper. With its high demand, dealing in copper has become a lucrative business, fetching $8,000 per ton.
South Africa is currently trying to become more active in terms of global markets and global trade. We're trying to promote global trade and encourage freer global trade. So it is a very delicate area to operate in when one tries to put in place restrictions in terms of any commodity.
So the big question is, does technology and legislation fall short in catching copper cable thieves? We'll get answers in a moment.
Earlier this year, the multi-billion rand Gautrain had a few hundred meters of its cable stolen. It lost millions of rands when its services between Centurion and Pretoria were disrupted.
There is moves afoot to change the law, because at the moment cable theft is not seen as an economic attack on the country, on the economy. It's seen as vagrancy and stuff like that. So the whole loop has to be closed before we can be serious.
Although the train runs on a higher power voltage than other rail services, the thieves got away with their daring act. Security measures are now being beefed up.
You have to really have a different approach towards what cable theft is. If it's just seen as a damage to property, then it's not seen as serious. They can't give serious penalties. But if it's seen as an economic threat to the country, then you can start going after the kingpins.
This multi-million rand copper bust at a Johannesburg dealer would have been registered as normal theft because cable theft does not have its own crime code. But in this case, Metrorail was lucky enough to identify the cables as their stolen property. Metrorail has its own crime reactive unit that responds to calls of cable tampering. But with daily cases of cable theft, the team often arrives too late.
And you can appreciate that in its original design, nobody ever anticipated that we would be sitting with a problem of this nature and magnitude where we now have to protect our copper wires.
In the past, angry commuters have torched trains out of sheer frustration over disrupted services. Stolen cables are often to blame. Commuting millions of people on a daily basis, disrupted services due to cable theft cost the company tens of millions.
We're talking at around 40 million, both direct and indirect. In fact, we're calculating what we're taking out of our pockets as PRASA, and obviously Metrorail as our operator in particular, but also loss of income. Some of the people that are traveling on our systems are people who cannot afford to stay away from work.
Metrorail is now looking at this technology as a possible solution. Already used extensively in the car industry, microdot technology applies small microdots to properties with distinctive information. There are now also plans to apply this technology to copper cables. It will allow for stolen cables to be linked to specific owners.
Microdot technology is a security product, and it gives any item a unique DNA or security. So of course law enforcement officers and investigators out there must be trained how to read and identify.
But the problem for companies like Eskom, is that power lines have already been laid over tens of thousands of kilometers. The power utility uses a private company to investigate cases of cable theft. With high-tech equipment like this helicopter and night vision cameras, cable thieves are tracked down. Here, cable thieves are caught in the act of stealing power lines.
That's a more organized syndicates that steal half a ton at a time, and maybe more. That's a more organized guys, and they already got a point where they will be able to sell their stolen loot. So they know where to sell beforehand. Identified, they've got their names, etc., etc. There's all the details. I'm going to hand you a copy of it. Okay. According to that informant.
Roy discusses a syndicate chart with one of his intelligence operators. The team gathers evidence in such a way as to ensure watertight cases.
And you can see what we've done also. But you can still link some of the material back to in terms of the length that you can work out, etc., etc., the quantity stolen. Because let's assume somebody received a ton of material. Where are you getting a ton of material? And we know there was an incident, so we'll try and link it to that specific incident.
From high-tech to high-smelling sensors, the Copperheads in Cape Town has decided to start training dogs to sniff out copper.
Yeah? Down?
It will also scare the copper thieves out there because they won't be able to hide it in places where they know we would maybe not think of, because we will bring in the sense of smell, and at times 200 Rand human smell. I think the copper thieves should be wary out there.
With the new Second-Hand Goods Act possibly only implemented next year, role players must scramble to stay ahead of their game.
There's an insatiable demand for copper in the world. China is firing up a power station every 2 weeks, which has got a demand on copper. So copper's price has gone through the roof.
The regulations that exist at the moment do not allow us to do our job properly, because it still makes it easier just for people to receive stolen property and export it and make millions of rands out of that.
It will never stop the copper theft at all. Never ever. Copper theft, as long as there's the price of copper is high, there's a demand for copper, and they will continue stealing copper.
So, what do you think? Should copper cable thieves be charged with economic sabotage? I'd really like your feedback, and you can do so via Facebook, Twitter and email. And do tune into my SAFM radio show on Friday at 2 p.m. when I'll take your calls on this issue. Now, last week we showed you who benefits from the controversial e-tolling system of Gauteng's 20 billion rand freeway improvement project. Some of the comments we received, one coming from Joseph Kohile saying, he tweeted, if they are going to toll, they must scrap tax and levies. And on Facebook, Felix Sabata writes, consider the new interchanges. Surely that's worth paying for. Well, that's it for tonight. Join us next week for another edition of Special Assignment when we point out the issues that matter.